Size, I think bedrooms and bathrooms matter more than square footage, so, and when you look at that, you could have a smaller house with 4 bedrooms and you would get a higher amount per night, right? So I think that's probably the biggest factor, but it's always capacity. What's capacity in your area? Is it a resort area? Can it handle, a 4,000 square foot house? Like Bend, Oregon, for example, is a great location where people go to vacation, and you can do really big vacation rentals over there. You could do a 3,500 square foot home, and it can house, 12 to 13 people. Your cost per night's going to be, 1,000 to 1,500. So you could get a really huge gross, and then, out of that, and then potentially get some really good revenue, when you look at it that way. It comes with more expenses and everything just like that, but, our previous house that we had, our Spyglass house that we had as an Airbnb that we were kind of quasi living there, that thing would, it would pull $750 to $1,200 per night because it was in a good location. People come to town. It was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house with a downstairs, another space that you could, stay in too. And so it just generated good money like that. So you can get more money, but I wouldn't want to say like, go buy the biggest Airbnb that you possibly can and go huge. I'd say probably start small, test it, figure it all out, and then proceed up the line as you can. And having one big one might be really cool to have, and it might be a smart thing to do, as well as a few smaller ones, so.
This leads me to another question, Bob, because you had your Spyglass house, and then obviously you have this university bungalow. Yeah. One of the questions that came to my mind is it more important to get like $1,000 a night or to get $400 for 3 or 4 or 5 nights?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I mean, you can look at it both ways. Do you want your occupancy to be 100%, and this is what I see in Hawaii all the time. They're like, oh, we can't even stay in our place. So our occupancy is 95 to 100%. Well, the night's so cheap that they're making the same amount as somebody that's, charging the right price, and they're at a 50% occupancy, right? So it's like, there's like 2 things to balance right there when you're kind of going back and forth, if that kind of makes sense. You got to kind of think about it that way. You want to drive your nightly cost up, to start seeing, bookings fall off. And then you might want to decrease it back down. And then you kind of know where you're at for like what you can really handle for that price. And there's websites that'll help you tell you this, but nothing beats just test, right? Like testing your area, because your area is specific. Exactly. So we went up, and we would try, I think on the university bungalow, we went up to like $450 a night. And we're like, was anybody gonna book it here? It's like, no, we're not getting any bookings. And you just start trickling it back down. You're like, okay, what's 400 do? Oh, we're getting bookings, but we don't have a full month. And we wanted to stay there right now because we're building something else. So we're like, okay, that's if people pay us 400 per night, we would totally move out of that for that, so that's kind of one of those things. But if you're just saying, I'm only doing it as an Airbnb, you would do that same method just to try to keep your bookings. And then you'd think about other ways to optimize. There's more than Airbnb, right? There's VRBO. There's hundreds of booking sites out there.
So at the end of the day though, Bob, yes, you always want to maximize your dollar. But if somebody said, if you had the option of somebody comes in and says, okay, hey, I'm going to take your property, like you're advertising it at $500. And you got me, I'm the negotiator. I'm coming in, I'm saying, hey, Bob, you know what? I know you're advertising this at $500 a night. And that's per night. I'm going to rent this for a full week, but I want to do it at $375. But then the next guy comes and says, yeah, Bob, I'm only going to rent this for 2 nights, but I'll pay you $750. Yeah. Like now, and again, you're not living in the property. This is this is an asset that you want to get the maximum amount of dollars that Ricky just went through, and you want to increase your bottom line net. Are you going to take the guy that's going to pay a little bit less but give you more nights, or are you going to take the guy that's going to pay a little bit more but isn't going to be there as often? As long?
The number's the same, right? So you obviously want the highest amount with the least amount of nights. That, I mean, is the concrete answer. I mean, that's like the Hawaii approach that you see when people are charging $200 a night and they're booked at 100%. Wear and tear goes up dramatically. That's basically having a renter in the property, but with a lot more turnover, and you got a lot more cleanings and a lot more stuff to do with. So that's why you want to go higher end. It's a really good point you're making. That's why we've went higher end, to get a higher price and less nights, because we can make the same amount of money as the guy that's trying to go really cheap and have just a flop shop Airbnb or VRBO. just to get people in it, you know? So I'd rather have less wear and tear on my property, less things missing, less things broken, you know, stuff like that, and less nights booked, but at a higher price.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to it, Tim, I think it's about, you know, maximizing the property, right? And that looks different ways at different times. And, you know, everybody's always like, how do I maximize revenue? How do I get more money? How do I get more money? Sometimes you get more money by reducing your expenses. I mean, that's just as important.
That's a great point.
So managing that, you know, buying the right furniture that's going to last, maybe it's a little more expensive, but maybe it lasts for a year longer, not buying it as often. You know, you're putting nicer things in there. So maybe it's also giving you more money on you can charge more for, right? Like if I got IKEA furniture in that house versus, you know, wherever Shelly buys, you know, the nice stuff, you know, if I put that stuff in, well, there's a different ambiance in the house itself. You know, so if you can reduce those costs too, I think that's, you know, an important component for people to look at. You know, that's why we like to rehab, right? Gut it, get it all fixed up. We know that the maintenance is going to be minimal on these things going forward.
I think another key point that you bring up here is that when you're calculating the Rubik's Cube or the algorithm for how to optimize, it is the turnover ratio. So if I can maximize how much I'm able to get per night and reduce the turnover, the number of nights I have to turn this thing over, I think that will keep your expenses down, keep your wear and tear down, but also increase your income. So I think, Ricky, would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's where the balancing comes in, right? Like Robert was talking about, you know, it's trial and error. There's no like formula, oh, this is what you charge, right? It's let's try 450. Are we getting enough? Does it make sense, right? And versus, okay, we charge 200, we're 100% full. But if we're 100% full, then there's a problem. You're not charging enough. Like you shouldn't be 100%. You know, it should never be 100% occupancy. I think the goal should be, you know, 75%. Where's that sweet spot where you can get that? Because at least from some of the experience that shows that that's where you're maximizing your revenue. And then you have to look at how do I now minimize the cost? So then I'm maximizing my profit.
So like guys, did you catch that? Because he just said you don't want 100% occupancy because then you're probably not charging enough. And the magic number, you know, and again, this isn't a perfect formula, but Ricky's magic number is, you know, you want about a 75% occupancy rate. That means you're charging close to the top, but you're not charging too little. And you're also reducing the amount of wear and tear on the property because of the turnover ratio. I think that's huge. That's a huge tip that you're giving people.